Hello and welcome to Product London Fan TV, and I would like to start this video by urging the Premier League to throw the book at Brighton Hove Albion for their transfer irregularities and hit them where it hurts and deduct their XG average rating. Welcome to the video. We're going to be looking at the candidates to be captain of Crystal Palace Football Club next season. And of course, we do have a club captain in Luka Milivojevic, so it makes sense to start with him. I put 4 candidates forward on social media earlier, and the votes have been cast. Luka Milivojevic got 10.5% of the vote, actually the least amount, interestingly enough. Now, there will be people watching this video thinking, why are we discussing who the club captain will be? We have a club captain, and a club captain who's been our captain for a few years, and we've been a mid-table side, pretty solid. Why would you change it? We've changed a lot this summer, management, players. Why don't we keep this one thing consistent? So I actually do get that argument. On the other hand, his form has been poor for me for a season and a bit, although to be fair to him, it did pick up towards the end of last season. And there were a couple of things that he last season that just didn't really sit well with some of the fan base, breaking the COVID rules around Christmas time. And then a comment about Brighton being a team he admires. It might have been misquoted, but it was a bizarre comment, and not one you say about your rivals and not one you say as Crystal Palace captain. So a couple of things there that didn't really sit well. And then also just for me, really, in terms of Luka, when he first came to us, he was like this midfield enforcer. If you think about the song, Luka, he comes from Serbia, he'll murder you. But he hasn't really fitted that billing really in the last year and a bit. And actually, I'd say he's been quite passive, really. And one of the things I think about in terms of Luka's captaincy is that about a season or so ago, when Wilfried Zaha was being treble marked and routinely fouled, okay, it still happens, but there was that period when Watford, back in the Premier League now, but were in there with Troy Deeney, etc., and Kapui, and I just felt like Luka and our senior players could have got around Wilf and protected him more from the players and the referees who weren't giving him the protection. And I didn't really feel he did his job there at times as captain. And that word passive as well is sort of a word I'd use to describe his performances really in the last year and a bit. So I do actually agree with the 89.5% who didn't vote for Luka to be captain next season. Although I do think he's got an important role to play next season for us, and I definitely hope he's going to be part of the squad. But I do think there are other candidates now, and we should be having a think about the captaincy. Another candidate is Anderson, who we've just signed from Fulham, who got 14.5% of the vote. Now, in my previous video where I spoke to James Wells, a Fulham fan, he advocated his leadership skills. He did captain Fulham at times last season, but I just think it's too soon for Anderson to be captain of Crystal Palace, having just signed. It's like when a boy or a girl goes into Love Island and they immediately make a move on someone who's coupled up. It's just going to ruffle feathers if Anderson goes in there and immediately cracks on with the captain's armband. You'd have more players in there like McArthur and Zaha with more appearances for Palace who've been there a number of years, who are going to be looking at him thinking, why has he walked in and taken the captain's armband? So I just don't think he can walk in and take the captain's armband. I think he could be a future captain of Crystal Palace from what Fulham fans are saying, but not yet, in my opinion. Next candidate is James McArthur, who got 16.9% of the vote. Now, James McArthur, for me, is the embodiment of the spirit of Crystal Palace. His tenacious tackles, he's up and down. I don't think anyone would argue with this appointment. Patrick Vieira did use him as a captain earlier in pre-season. The only argument I'd say against is, will he play every game? I think he's got to a point in his career where he needs to be rested at times. Conor Gallagher has been brought in. I do think those two will predominantly play together, but there will be occasions where I think McArthur needs to be rested. But I guess that's where you have a good vice captain ready. So for me, James McArthur, I think if they announced it, every Palace fan would be behind that. I just think there's another candidate that would absolutely excite and ignite Palace fans as captain, and that is Wilfried Zaha, who got 58.1% of the vote. Now, opposition fans are going to say, how can you have someone who's always shouting at the referee and his own players as captain of your football club? Well, we see that as passion, and that's another video, which it will be coming up, by the way. And also, just as Palace fans, we, of course, look to that performance as captain at Old Trafford last season, where he scored 2 goals. And for me, that was one of the most controlled performances that I've seen from Wilfried Zaha in a Crystal Palace shirt. And it just seemed to give him another inch. And I think as well, it would be that the romanticist in me as a Palace fan, having seen him come through the academy, that in us will obviously want us to see Zaha get the armband. But I think as well, it'd be a nice sort of gesture, considering he hasn't got the move he wanted. It might just be something that gives him that little carrot, that little boost that I think he possibly needs at this stage of his career. I don't think he's going to be a captain in the mold of Mile Jedinak. I don't think he's going to be shouting and bawling on the pitch, but he will lead by his performances. And we know the stats of our record when he doesn't play for us. Last season, he scored 11 goals in a team that had one of the least amount of possession in Europe. So I do think he would lead by example in the sense of his performances, rather than being really, really vocal. But my fundamental point here as to why I think Will should be captain, and I think this is really, for me, the point that wins it for me, is I alluded to earlier about his relationship with referees. Now, there's a stat today that I've read again, that last season, Wilfried Zaha was one of the most fouled players in the Premier League. He was second behind Jack Grealish, but he was second by some distance. And the referees don't give him the protection that he needs, really. Sometimes even booking him after he's been fouled. Now, it would be interesting, wouldn't it, if he was captain? Would that help him build a relationship with referees? There are definitely a few referees I think definitely have it in for him and have an agenda against him. But if Wilf's the one going in with a team sheet before the game, if Wilf's the one that the referee has to speak to, whether there's an issue with the team or an individual player during the game, and he's got that dialogue before and during the game, is that going to improve Zaha's relationships with referees? And that can only be a positive thing for Wilf, but also for us as a team ourselves. So for me, for a multitude of reasons, my captain of Crystal Palace next season would be Wilfried Zaha. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Which candidate would you go for? Is there anyone in the 4 outside of the 4 that I discussed? Someone mentioned Joel Ward on social media earlier. Obviously a very deserving candidate. But for me, I would go for Wilfried Zaha as captain of Crystal Palace Club for the season coming up, which is soon. It is exciting. As always, let me know your thoughts. Who would be your captain? And as always, if you've liked this video, press the subscribe button.